Yes, okay.
Greetings and welcome to Spin a Yarn Live, the Tea Time Book Club and Crafting Circle. Today we have no tea.
No, we had a late lunch, so no tea for us. But we're crafting.
Yay, crafting.
Look, I'm making lace.
I'm still working on this darn bookmark that's taken, 8 episodes now?
Yes.
And what are you working on?
I'm working on a lace scarf. Look how lacy. Yes. From the Lace Once Game Wonders, which is the same one if you watched last week's. It's from the same book that I'm doing the hat from. I finished the hat. Now I'm working on a scarf. In a matching yarn.
Okay. Go ahead and go onto the Twitter and use hashtag YarnItAll to tell us what projects you'll be working on this episode, what your current status is. Okay, so today we're talking about the second book in the Myth series. Myth
Conception.
Myth Conceptions. And the pun titles continue. They're great.
No. I have made mention of one of the puns in the book, and it's
Oh.
It's dumb. I don't know what chapter it is, but they were talking about Gleep and how he's a talented dragon.
Yeah, no, that was bad.
I wrote in my notes, talented dragon. Really, Robert Aspirin? Really?
Well, didn't somebody sigh at the same time, or Skeeve felt embarrassed about saying that?
Oh, I don't recall.
I don't remember. No, I remember that. That was definitely over the top.
It might have been Tanda. It was like...
So, this book, slightly better written than the first one.
Yes, I agree. Definitely better written than the first one.
Loads of comedy.
It's very silly.
So, this is actually my second favorite book in the entire series. And pretty much one of my favorite books.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why. Just the situation of trying to apply to become or get a cushy job as a court magician.
It's a cushy job, Oz said. Be a cushy job, he said. All I have to do is worry about the interview, he said. Which is almost, not word for word, but pretty close to what Skeeve says after he lands the job. And they're like, oh yes, we need to defeat this...
The largest
invading
army in the world.
It's trying to... And you have to do it all by yourself. We're not giving you any troops. It's got to be magic over might, or whatever it is.
Yeah, because... Yeah. But yeah, so we get to go back to Deva, which I always enjoy. Especially when Skeeve gets left alone on Deva.
Oh, poor Skeeve.
That's pretty much the best thing ever.
Poor Skeeve. But he...
Poor Oz.
Poor Oz. But to his credit, he did get a good team together, and they were able to do what needed to be done. But it is pretty funny. Aw. I don't like how that happened.
Oh no.
Well, because I finished off a ball that I was working with, and then I needed to start a new one, and it's the same designer, but because it's hand dyed, it's gonna be like that, which is kind of a shame. Near the end of this ball, there will be more color, as I recall when I was putting it together. But you see how the last bit of the last skein I was using was full of the color, and then this one that I'm using is
very
significantly less.
Yeah, I wonder if it picks up and it may make kind of like a stripey.
Maybe. And that'll work. I mean, I'm knitting it for a 3-year-old, so I don't really think she'll care. But, for me personally, it's just kind of like, meh.
Yeah.
But anyway. So yes, I did like this book. I did think it was funnier and it was better written than the first one. Now, what confuses me, well, not confuses me, but it's just interesting because this book... The last Myth book was written in, 1969 or something? And this book has a copyright of 1980. So there was...
Definitely some time.
There was a lot of time between these two books.
Yeah, and that happens later on, once we get to the sweet mystery of life. Yes. after that book, it took quite a while, like almost another decade, to get the sequel.
Well,
like, yeah. So what we can talk more about. I didn't do any research on why these took so long, but
it's like a George R.R. Martin situation.
oh my goodness.
Which we were discussing that. We were at the bookstore today because the next book we're going to read is I, Robot by Ivan Asimov. I almost said Istvin, and I was like, no.
Almost.
That's not his name. That's not his name.
I was going for Robert Aspirin again, and I'm like, no.
We were both wrong and thinking of the same thing. But in any case, like I was asking one of the booksellers if they had a release date yet for the next Harry Dresden book, which is Peace Talks, and there is still no release date on it.
No.
And it's really annoying because he used to be on a really well-maintained schedule of releasing a book a year, like Patricia Briggs is, but family situations, I'm not sure exactly what's going on, if there's a health situation or whatnot, caused a delay, and which is understandable, but at the same time, you're like,
but I want more.
I really, really want to keep reading and know what happens. So I gotta wait for that.
Yeah, no, if you manage to make it through our first Dresden episode, which we may have to redo at some point, because I'm not sure if I can fix that audio.
The audio is really crummy. There's, an echo. We ended up having 2 recording devices going at the same time.
And it's saved into one audio file.
Well, it saves the 2 audios into one visual. So, because you only have the one.
Well, yeah, but with a lot of times when you record, it can do an audio channel and multiple a video channel and multiple audio channels, and they're kind of separated in the file.
Right.
So you can edit it and just like mute one of them. But the first episode we did, I messed up, and so it went out combining those 2 audio streams into one stream, which makes it very difficult.
Yeah, so we might redo that one. It's an episode we didn't put out live, so we might end up redoing the first one.
Yeah.
Which...
And I think I know how on YouTube to get it to be posted in the right time frame. Like, I think I can get it to upload a new file and then have it post before all the others have posted. So if people go back in time and...
They go back in time? That's cool. You have a TARDIS?
Yes.
Can I borrow it?
No.
Don't know what thing.
Anyways, but we're not talking about that episode.
No. We are talking about misconceptions.
So yeah, definitely one of my favorite scenes is Skeev being left alone on Deva, going into basically a McDonald's.
They don't call it McDonald's, but...
It's the Double Crescent, or Double Crescent Inn.
It's Double Crescent Inn, that's right. And then he goes in, and what does he do? He thinks to himself, he's the son of farmers. So he thinks to himself back to what his father used to say, which was, always be dubious of the food if the dining area is
too clean.
And of course, when you go into a McDonald's or a Burger King or whatever, everything's made of plastic or steel, and like everything's bolted to the floor, and it smells sort of food, but mostly of the disinfectants that they use every night to like mop up and get everything, because you get kids in and out and all that stuff. And so he's just like, I don't think I want anything here.
Then we meet Brockwurst again, and he shares some of his strawberry milkshake,
which Skeev I don't think ever touches.
He's doesn't.
Just like
I think maybe in a later book.
I think he would, because at some point they
well,
end up...
let's not do spoilers.
Right. So,
but
yeah, maybe he does eat it later on in the book or in the series.
Yeah, I feel like at some point he ends up liking the milkshakes. But yeah, in this book he's not willing to touch it because it's this weird pink gloppy drink.
Yeah, it's like. Ugh.
I mean, if you think of the Middle Ages and you try to pass that off.
Right.
I don't know if too many people would take you up on that.
Yeah, most people would be like, because I mean, in of itself, it's such an artificial color.
Yeah.
Because you can make, when you make a smoothie even with just strawberries and you don't add anything in, there's a pinkness to it, but it's not quite as artificial as when you get
Yeah.
a pink milkshake. Like if you make it out of strawberry ice cream, because a lot of ice cream has a lot of preservatives and stuff, including stuff for color.
Right.
It's usually at the very end because it's usually the least amount that they use. Because like food coloring, all you have to do is like a couple of drops in a big old batch of, say, icing, just to get it to be a soft pink that you want it to be. It can sometimes be really hard to control that. You ask anybody who has baked their own cupcakes and done their own dye job on that. You have to be really light with the food coloring, otherwise you end up with like a neon blue, and you're like, I didn't want that.
So, oh man, there's a lot of really interesting characters. So let's just start. What did you think of Brockwurst in this one?
Well, Brockwurst is much the same as the first one. He didn't get, because Brockwurst was in the first book, he didn't get as much, we didn't really get to feel him out that much in the first book, because there were other imps involved, and of course, we were trying to still get to know Oz and all that jazz. So we get a little bit more of him, and I like him okay. Again, he doesn't leave very much of an impression. Like, I kept forgetting that he was also trained as an assassin.
Yeah.
I kept forgetting that, because when you think of assassin, you mainly think of Tanda, who we've actually seen work some assassin magic that she's done in the previous book. So I often think of her. So I like him. I like him okay.
Yeah, he's definitely kind of there to be obvious to the reader that Skeeve did not mean to hire him.
Yeah, like he keeps calling him boss, much to the great annoyance of Oz when Oz comes and catches up with everybody, and he's like, boss?
So yeah, while they're hanging, then we get Ajax.
I like Ajax.
Ajax is fantastic.
He is so
I want to meet
cool.
Ajax IRL.
He's so old.
I know.
But no, he's really, really cool. And I kept on thinking, like, I couldn't remember when I was reading the book. This is my second time. I shouldn't say it's my second time reading the book. It's my second time being familiar with the story. First time actually reading it, because Paul used to read them to me. Which was nice, but I often would fall asleep. Because that was the idea. He would read to me and then I would just fall asleep. Because apparently I'm 3. But anyway.
Well, you're...
So I kept on thinking, like, in the back of my head that something bad was going to happen, because, like, Ajax was so old, I couldn't remember. I was like, does he die in this book, or does he actually get angry at Skeeve's comment of him being a coward and, like, turn on him later? Like, I kept thinking there was something really significant about Ajax, but I was wrong.
Yeah.
So, that was good.
He was just kind of a wholesome character. It's like, he's an old soldier from the dimension Archaea, or I keep wanting to pronounce it Archaea, but that's where archers come from.
That's what he does.
So he's an archer, like that's his race.
Right.
And he's an old soldier, but in a lot of times, old soldiers come across not really the
best. Nicest. Yeah,
like if you've ever read Xanth, which we'll probably talk about at some point.
I feel.
It was definitely a product of its times.
Yeah. There's an old soldier in Xanth.
There's a soldier, and he's very sexist.
He's really gruff and stuff, and like, I don't remember if it mentions anything about him maybe having PTSD or something like that.
I don't think so.
But Ajax, he doesn't have any of that. He's just a guy who's seen multiple battles. And
like, many battles.
I mean, so with the Gremlin,
oh, yes.
at one point somebody mentions that the Gremlin said that he's been following him for 2 centuries, and he was old when the Gremlin started following him. So it's another example where he is indeed a different race. Humanoid and human-looking, though he is, kind of like Gandalf from The Lord of the Rings, who, for all his physical appearances, he just appears to be an abnormally tall human. But the fact of the matter is that he is not human.
Yeah.
He's a creature of the old world, like on the same level as the Balrogs, which is why he's able to fight them. But that is for a different time.
Yes.
Even though I love Dave Kellett, author of the Sheldon comics. I love his take on the whole Balrog thing. You should read his comics. It's hilarious. Anyway.
I also love when we were watching the Spoonie Experiment when he did his review of the Ultima series. He did a bit with him as Gandalf fighting a Balrog, and it's
silly.
It's silly because he's making a point about the Ultima game having like guns in it or something, so he's with Gandalf with like big guns or whatnot.
I forgot that.
But yet, like almost all of the scenes are like every time it switches to Spoonie being Gandalf, he plays it pretty well and it matches up. I mean, obviously you can tell when it's movie and not movie quality,
right.
But he does it really well.
It's very funny. But again, then you have to. He was someone who has stage experience. We don't have stage experience.
No.
Just so you know, we don't come from a stage background, and I may be knitting,
unfortunately.
But my first degree was in chemistry, and he's a mathematician, so you can see, it's totally chemistry. Obviously.
I mean, though I am interested in trying to learn more.
Well, yes, we're
especially with the YouTube channel. That's a good.
It's a good
exercise for us to be on camera, get comfortable with camera, and slowly work.
Here's a fun fact: I was extremely camera shy even after I got to college.
Yep.
Hi guys.
I still am, sort of.
I seem to have gotten over the shyness.
That's good.
Maybe it's because I'm sitting.
For me, it's like right before pushing the on button. It's like right before the camera starts rolling. I'm like, oh. It's fantastic. Anyways.
It is fantastic.
So Ajax is old and cool, and
he's old and cool, and like what I do like about him is that Tanda, who we know from the previous book, she does like to give very energetic greetings when she sees her old friends again. And what I mean by energetic is that she usually just ends
glomping.
up glomps. Yeah, it's usually just a glomp. She just runs up and she hugs you fiercely, and you're just like, that's nice. So she wants to go and do the same thing to Ajax, and he's like, he very smoothly just kind of moves his bow in front of her, and he's like, okay, no, I'm not that young anymore. I can't really handle your traditional greetings there, girl. So don't do that. Just like, oh.
But you can also tell she has a good respect of him.
Yes.
Which when he falls asleep and ends up not doing his duty, like he's so ashamed.
He is.
That he's willing to just quit and say he's done with it. And of course, now I was going to go through characters, but we're hopping onto this now. This is one of the great character moments of Skeev. Where we saw it a little bit in the first book, where Skeev does not like to be pushed around.
Yeah.
He's usually very not sure of himself. But then when he gets pushed around and his back is kind of up against a wall, as it were, he turns and gets a lot more
confidence.
Aggressive, confidence. And in this one, it's not being backed up against the wall. Well, sort of. The whole rest of the team, including Ajax, is saying that Ajax needs to go.
He's old, he's a liability, something might happen to him, something might happen to us since we're trying to count on him.
And so Skeev, this, 16-year-old boy or something
he's
around that?
He's supposed to be very young. And his original motivation was to be a thief.
Yeah.
So.
And, definitely staying out of the way of every confrontation to this, multi-century-old warrior who's fought in more battles than, I don't know, Skeev has even put clothes on.
Yeah.
And so Skeev turns on and it's like, I didn't realize I was hiring a coward.
Yeah, and everyone's like...
And everybody freezes.
It's a sharp intake of breath from somewhere behind me, but I didn't turn to look. I just kept looking at Ajax, and it's like... Ugh. Yeah.
But then Ajax basically takes his meaning, and it works out. But it's definitely a very it's very tense scene.
Yeah, because
really well written.
Because you think for a moment, because bear in mind, we've already seen Ajax in less time than not less than time than it takes you for you to blink, but within a mere few seconds has strung his bow, knocked an arrow, and let it fly and hit his target right on.
Yeah.
This is someone who, what's a good analogy? Who, if you've seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, the series, They talk about some archers. I can't remember what they're called
I
now,
don't remember.
but they can like pin a fly to a tree from 100 yards away without killing it.
Yeah.
You know, stuff like that. Like this is what he is.
Yeah.
And he's got centuries of experience, and you're kind of sitting there going, is he gonna like just kill Skeeve right now?
Adding on to that experience, he has that kind of ability to sleep whenever he has
where
chance.
and whenever he gets
which,
a chance.
again, we see in a later book of Xanth, which you have not read, that I do want to read to you. But it's another kind of soldiery type who's trained himself to do this. But anyway, so Ajax is asleep when Skeeve is trying to figure out his abilities, and is like, do you think you could hit that signal tower? So he's like, awake, bowstrung, arrow shot, turned around, and doesn't even look.
Because he knows he's hit his mark, which he totally has. But that bears the question. I was wondering about this scene, because he does that, and then the soldier who was holding on to the signaling flag, like, the flag just...
It was a signaling mirror. And the mirror got cracked. Yeah.
Was it a mirror? I'm pretty sure it was a post. They said a post that was...
Yeah. The way I read it is that the arrow just kind of went straight through, so that there was no arrow evidence. All of a sudden, like, just something breaks, and the person there is like, why did it break? But they didn't realize that was an attack or anything. Now we enter the segment of excitingly watching people read a book silently. So I'll go to the comments. There are no comments. That was efficient.
Underneath his cloak, cocked it, let it fly before I could stop him. The shaft disappeared in the direction of the nearest tower. With a sinking heart, I strained my eyes to try and track its flight. The shaft being the arrow shaft. Leaning against the... There was a man standing on the tower's platform, his standard leaning against the railing beside him. Suddenly, his standard toppled over, apparently breaking off a handspan from its crosspiece. The man bent to retrieve the bottom portion of the pole, staring with apparent confusion at the broken end. Okay, so I read that to hear that like there was a wooden post and he just slashed it in half.
Flag, yeah.
Okay, but yeah, okay, I can see what you're saying. The arrowhead must be sharp enough
that just kind of went straight through.
And then it went through, because that was kind of my, well, now wait a minute, wouldn't the guard have seen the arrow? But apparently not, if the arrow was so sharp that it was just like, woo!
It's like the Brian Regan joke from his specials, All By Myself, which you should watch. Where it's like, and all of the sudden, but I'm not going to ruin the joke. Don't ruin the joke.
I emphasize all of the sudden.
Go watch his special because it is hilarious.
He keeps saying watch. It is actually an audio only special.
It is audio only.
Yes.
Which is why he can do his
opening get. His little opening trick, which is... Anyway, Brian Regan is hilarious, and you should listen to his stand-up because he's really, really fun.
Yes.
And clean, which is nice.
He is very clean.
He's very clean. It's pretty cool. Anyway. So, yeah, no, I really like Ajax, but... So what about Gus? What do you think about Gus?
You know what? I like Gus. He's kind of this... he reminds me of one of my best friends from high school, Alex.
I met Alex the once.
Yeah. He's got this kind of friendliness to him. Almost a warmth despite being made of stone.
You see what he's doing? He's got sucked into the puns.
What pun?
Keep going.
What? He has a warmth to him.
Yes.
He has a warm heart.
Despite being made of stone, as you said. Anyway, continue.
He's a gargoyle made of stone.
Yes.
Which is why he can have his little friend.
His little
salamander. Which is a salamander friend.
He's so cute. Oh, what's his name?
I forget.
I know. It's a salamander. He doesn't actually talk, but he's he's a like a flame or fire salamander.
Yeah.
So Gus introduces the salamander to Skeeve, who goes to pet it, and Gus is like, "What are you doing?" Because the reason that they're friends is that the gargoyle is one of the few creatures that the salamander won't flat out burn to a crisp and completely kill.
Yeah.
So.
So what did you think about Gus?
I liked him. I mean, he wasn't really that prevalent a character. Not as
Burford.
prevalent. Burford.
Burford is the salamander's name.
I like Burford.
Yeah, Burford's fun.
Even though he doesn't talk, he's just so cute.
Yeah, he doesn't really show off too much personality in this book.
No,
He's just kind of there as a good foundation.
Yeah, he's
There's the pun.
Foundation because he's made of stone. No, because he can fly, so there's the aerial support, and then with the salamander, he can like drop the salamander within the ranks of the opposing army, where the salamander can do the most damage, since he'll immediately ignite whatever it is that he touches. So, which is oh so much fun.
Okay. Oh.
The gremlin.
Yeah. What did you think about the gremlin?
I liked the gremlin. So this little blue gremlin has been following Ajax, and Ajax knows that he's being followed by the gremlin. But the thing about the gremlin, it's hard to figure out what's going on. I don't know if the gremlin is like with Faye in the Patricia Briggs novels. Is it the idea that he can make himself invisible or camouflage so well that you don't see him anymore? Or can he literally just disappear? Because he seems to...
What if he's Z?
Why would Z personify himself as a small blue thing? I don't see that happening. If you've read any Patricia Briggs, Mercy Thompson with Zebold Albersmiter, or however he's...
Adalbert Smiter. Adalbert
Smiter. Look, it's a German name. Just because I'm half German doesn't mean I know what I'm doing.
And we will cover Mercy at some point.
We will. It's a really, really fun series. I would like to cover it in conjunction with Alpha Omega, but I feel like that'd be too much.
I mean, I think we could do it.
But what about
It'll be another long story. Anyways.
But so anyway, I really like him because so throughout the whole book, Oz is convinced that gremlins don't exist.
Yeah.
But at one point or another, all of the other members of the team have seen and or spoken to the gremlin, whose name obviously we actually don't know.
Yeah.
But like Ajax knows that he's being followed by him. Gus has seen him. Brockhurst has spoken with him, and Tanda has also spoken with him. And the only one who's never really seen him is Oz. So throughout the whole book, Oz is like, oh my god, you guys, you need to stop. There is no freaking gremlin.
There's no such thing as gremlins.
There's no such thing as gremlins.
Which is also, again, well written. It's hard to write something that people don't believe in a fantasy book where the audience does not know, is not intimate with what's plausible and not plausible in that universe.
Right.
So it's like, if we didn't have Oz constantly saying that gremlins don't exist.
Right, and the fact that every time someone says, well, the gremlin just said, and they're like, what gremlin? And you turn around going, oh, well, he was just here. You know, the whole idea that he is somehow making himself not seen, or he's disappearing.
Yeah, I always figured he was just quickly...
dashing away, yeah.
Not really dashing, but maybe like teleport stepping sort of thing. That's how I view it, even though it never says anything like that in the book.
Maybe. Well, because we never see... Because whenever we actually have a scene where we are interacting with the gremlin, whether it's Skeeve or one of the other characters, they're standing still with him. So maybe it is that when the gremlin moves... the way he moves is not perceptible to most other creatures. Maybe that's what's going on.
Who knows?
But yeah, and then near the end, he whispers into Oz's ear, and Oz is like, aha!
Yeah, they're all in a big bind.
The gremlin knows!
And then Gremlin basically gives a hint.
Which is another thing, because they are surrounded by troops at this point. So, and the gremlin wasn't there.
Yeah.
So the whole idea is, well, okay, so there it is. How is it that all of a sudden there's a gremlin talking to Oz?
Yeah.
You're just like, where did he come?
Yeah, so again, it's not something that doesn't exist in the universe. It still exists. Mm-hmm. But you can easily see why people think gremlins don't exist.
Right, because basically it seems to me that unless they want you to know that they're there, they want you to see them or perceive them in some way, they're not going to let you. It's kind of like the idea of Faye and the Mercy Thompson. It's not necessarily that ignorance is bliss, but it helps.
Was there any other side characters besides the characters we had last book?
No, but what about
those three.
what about Big Julie? What'd you think about Big Julie?
Big Julie.
Everyone loves Big Julie. He's a sweetie.
He's a sweetie, but he's also a really sharp tactician.
Oh, yeah. No,
and he does not play fair.
He doesn't play fair.
So,
I say he's a sweetie because that's his personality. He is a sweet guy. He's a nice guy. He doesn't really want to fight. He doesn't really want to do any of this stuff. But just because he doesn't want to doesn't mean he doesn't know how to. Yeah. Just because I'm not actually actively doing anything chemistry-wise, I still know how organic and some parts of inorganic work. I say some parts because inorganic chemistry is hard. It is.
I could never do chemistry.
The
math was too wrong for me.
Stoichiometry makes perfect sense. Okay? I don't know why you can't wrap your brain around it, but stoichiometry makes perfect sense.
But you need to reduce your equations.
We're not talking about stoichiometry, okay?
2H plus 1O equals 1H2O. That's how it should work.
That's not how it works. The problem is about the bonds.
The math is wrong.
Attention. Anyway, the point is that Big Julie doesn't want to do any of the fighting, but he is a brilliant tactician.
And he is willing to know. So one of the scenes early on, Skeeve is trying to make plans and sees that he has Tanda and Brockhurst, two trained assassins. He's like, why don't we just have them assassinate the general?
Yeah,
the generals, and we don't have to deal with all this. Yeah. And Oz is like, well, that's definitely a technique, but there's standard like agreements of war, because if you can do that to them, they can do that to you. Yeah, and Skeeve is like, oh, let's not do that then.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Geneva Convention. Yeah. The idea is that when one of the clauses in the Geneva Convention being is that whenever there is an aerial assault or whatever it is, it's a general kind of, unspoken, but then they were like, well, let's put it in the Geneva Convention. You do not target medics.
Yeah.
You don't target the medical units, and you don't target any hospitals. You don't target medic tents and stuff like that.
And I think in the modern Geneva Conventions or whatnot, if a soldier
there's like POW
seeks asylum at a medic, they get it regardless of which side they're on.
Yeah, if they need medical attention, then they get it. So it's kind of the same thing. So as long as,
as long as you play fair.
As long as Skeeve and his people don't do something underhanded like, well, let's just assassinate the generals, then they won't send assassins to go after Skeeve.
Yeah.
So Skeeve's like, oh, okay. Let's go.
Yeah. But, so, in the final, Skeeve and all of his team are in a war council with Big Julie, the leader of this biggest army of the world, basically.
Because they're
I imagine someone
assimilating.
Yeah, I imagine an army similar to Alexander the Great's.
Yeah, which basically did the same thing. I'm just gonna march across here, and as I march, I'm gonna recruit you guys.
Yeah. So
did the Mongols do the same thing? Wait for it. The Mongols.
Watch Crash Course.
Yes. Crash Course
but,
anything.
So they're doing this war council, and like inside this tent, and Big Julie's like, well, I don't play fair, and the tent sides come down, and all of his army silently, because Oz did not hear it.
That's true, I didn't think about that. Yeah. If Oz didn't hear it.
Yeah, but somehow we're able to just basically surround the tent completely.
With weapons and arrows knocked.
Which, of course, you can imagine goes against treaties of, let's have a meeting with the enemy. So he's willing to not play fair, but he's doing it because he has to, not because he wants to.
Right, the whole idea of the gambling debt.
The gambling debts.
And that was one thing that kind of annoyed me in the book, and I had originally written a little blurb about that, about how, what the heck happened, but of course, at the very end of the book, it's explained how it is that, just like that, the war was over, and all of the troops just disappeared.
Yeah.
And it was like, and I wrote all this, what do you mean they disappeared? Did they go to the Bazaar Deva? Did they send them to a different dimension? What dimension 7-2, blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, you get a couple more pages in, and you go, oh, I see. Yeah.
They get added to
like, oh,
Pulsealtum's.
Yes.
Puzzletum's. I don't know how it's pronounced.
I think it's fossil, like fossil.
Yeah, I always pronounced it Pulsealtum because that sounded better to me, but yeah. Especially with some of the kingdoms in the Frozen movie. I can't remember what it is, but Puzzletum sounds like one of those silly, not so great kingdoms. Okay, so let's finish off our main cast and then go back to the castle. Tanda in this one is written a lot better. However, and she will continue to get better. I think the Arthur is just learning how to write women.
Sometimes
but
it's hard. Yeah,
once in either next book or the book after that, she starts becoming a much better character.
Yeah,
but right now she's silent.
Okay.
She doesn't speak when the men talk, so that's kind of questionable. Yeah, but she's also willing to share her opinions afterwards on a one-on-one, which kind of makes sense to the character being an assassin. Yeah. Even though the other part of her character is she has these big, huge greetings. But,
right, she's obviously very energetic, and she's not shy.
Yeah, so the fact that she's quiet during meetings, but then comes up and talks to people individually is a bit weird.
Yeah.
But she's still better represented in this book than the previous book.
She is,
and she'll keep getting better.
Although it's still because they make a comment about how when she first meets up with Skeeve again, he's so happy because she's very tactile, so she goes up and gives him a hug. She's always calling him handsome, this kind of stuff. And I'm pretty sure the idea is that she is quite a few years older than he is.
Oh yeah, I think she's at least a century or two.
Okay.
I think
That's what I was gonna say.
Oh, you meant like appearance-wise? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think appearance-wise, she's probably in like her early or mid-20s. If Skeeve is in his teens.
Yeah, if we want to go for physical appearance. But so, she greets him, and then she greets Gleep. She greets the dragon in a similar fashion, but she like kind of squats down on the ground to like a hug and cuddle the dragon, and Skeeve mentions how that's fine because her tunic is so tight and it like rides up a little bit and all that stuff, and it's like okay. And then she sees Oz, and she goes and greets him, and she just kind of glomps on him. She jumps on him, and they
knocks him over. Yeah,
they fall over, and then she rolls off of him, straightening her tunic, saying, "Well, at least I don't need to ask if you're happy to see me."
And it's at least I don't. Yeah, exactly.
It's like, that's nice.
You're in your good memory. The only difference was it's glad to see me, not happy to see me.
Sorry.
How dare you not remember the quote when you read it once?
My quote is not as good as you were hoping my audio memory to be. I apologize, Paul. Anyway. So it's still a little annoying because she's the only female. Not that she minds. I mean, she gets along with everybody, which I think is a good female character trait. Because a lot of females in like more recent books written by men, not necessarily by women, although sometimes by women, if they're a strong female character, sometimes they're just cold. Like they always want to be in power, so they are always just kind of distant from people. It's nice to have a character that really doesn't give a crap what you think about her. If she likes you, she's going to be this tactile, which again, she wanted to be with Ajax because she likes him, but he's like, I'm too old for your really energetic greetings anymore, so please don't jump on me. Yeah.
And of course, the other part is, which is kind of a handful to juggle, is the book is written first perspective from a teenage boy's point of view.
Right.
As written by a male author. So it's interesting. Like,
it's hard.
I do like, throughout the series, we'll see what happens. I'm not going to spoil any future books for you. But it's really interesting to watch how that dynamic works in the future. And starting from where we are now with this teenage boy with a crush on
a voluptuous, curvy, very bubbly kind of girl So I mean, it's
and we don't know.
It's hard to not like somebody who's like that,
yeah.
you know, which is a strategy on its own.
Oh yeah.
As an assassin, you'd think she would like to minimize how well people know her, how well people see her. You know, even though she's got bright green hair and this kind of stuff, and she dresses the way she wants to dress, and that's great. But you would think as an assassin, you know, she'd keep to herself and be kind of brooding and stuff.
I mean, unless
but she's not.
Yeah, unless that's the other tactic, is she's a master assassin, but then when people go looking for an assassin, they don't look at her because she's like, obviously too bubbly to be an assassin.
Right. Why would you ever accuse somebody who is so bubbly and fun
with bright green hair?
With bright green hair. Why would you associate them with something as dark as slipping into someone's house in the middle of the night and strangling them without them ever waking up? Which is something we saw her do. I mean, not exactly that, but we saw her in the previous book do the physical motion of strangling somebody, and then her target was like on the floor below her.
So basically like Darth Vader.
Right, like she's strangling something that's up here where there's nothing here, but the person below that she's focusing on all of a sudden can't breathe and his larynx is getting, you know, crushed. So, which was kind of cool, because all of a sudden Ski was like, oh shit.
Yeah, you never expect it from her, just like you never expect Naruto to be a ninja.
I'm not a fan of Naruto. If you couldn't tell by my very blank face.
It's an interesting world.
It's an interesting
We may
world.
talk about it one day, but after we finish One Piece, which is like 900 chapters and we've covered 10.
After we finish One Piece. It's funny that he says, after we finish.
Well, after...
As it is an ongoing series.
Well, he's planning for it to end.
Shh! I don't want you to say that. Don't end the series.
And I meant and as in catch up.
I see.
So,
okay.
There we go.
Okay, I like that better.
Anyways, so that's Sanda. She's done much better. She'll continue to be a much, much better character. Oz in this one.
Oz in this one is interesting, because Oz usually likes to take control of situations, but because everybody was technically hired by Skeeve in the bazaar, everyone is calling Skeeve boss. And as it's kind of widely known that Pervex are not the easiest individuals to get along with, you know, they would prefer to have someone from Claw leading them, I feel like. Especially Broadhurst, who's an imp and does not like Pervex at all. In fact, it doesn't call him Pervex. He still continues to just call him a pervert, which is rude. But
rude.
It's very rude, because Oz is not.
But yeah, so Oz specifically stays in second of command status. It's like, well, go ahead, fearless leader.
Yeah, like, go ahead. Which initially makes Skeeve very uncomfortable. But as it turns out, when properly motivated, Skeeve is actually very good at dictating what needs to be done. And he kind of, I wouldn't say he keeps a cool head about it, because he goes into the full frontal aggressive motions when he thinks that Oz has been killed by the other troops. Then he just kind of like, you know, all of the warmth, you know, so like when your blood drains from your face kind of thing. And I feel like there's kind of a similar reaction here where all of the warmth that is Skeeve, who is essentially a warm, pretty caring person, all just kind of drains away. And he's like, screw it, we're taking these mofos out. To the point that he does something pretty dark.
Oh, yes.
I mean, like, so there's the General the Brute, who's been very brutish and, you know, has done all this stuff.
Basically made an agreement that, we'll consider something, we'll each take a hostage from the others.
Right.
And then I'll send yours back to you with the decision we make.
Right, and
then he decides to kill and burn Oz.
Yeah, so at first he hangs him, and Skeeve's like, well, whatever, I know that just hanging him won't do anything, and then he chucks him into a fire, and then Skeeve's like, oh my god. So he creates these illusions. Like, first of all, he creates, like, this imp army, and the troops are like, oh my gosh, an imp army. But then, because Gus is flying overwards, they try to shoot at Gus, but what's that going to do against a stone gargoyle? So the arrowheads start going to the other side of, it's friendly fire.
Yeah.
So they fire back, and then Skeev's like, oh, I know, I'll put the imps inside with the troops. So then they think, oh my gosh, there are demons.
So they start swinging, but hitting each other.
And so then he sees the brute. He sees the general, and he's so angry that he makes the general look like Oz. And all of his troops turn around and are like, oh my gosh, the demon that we thought we just killed isn't dead yet. So let's kill him.
Yeah.
And like he basically gets beaten and chopped to bits by his own troops, and you're like, whoa, dude, that's really dark. That's really dark, and whoa.
For someone who, as far as we knew at the time, murdered someone who was under his protection, it's like, well, he kind of deserves it if you believe in the capital punishment at all, but it's still
right. But you're like
super dark
because because the brute is going through his troops and is trying to calm everybody down, and he's like, look, you're not you anymore. You're going to be the demon that you thought you killed, and I'm going to make you suffer. And he certainly does.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, okay, Dave.
But we also see with that part of Skeev's compassion. Skeev has a very strong compassionate streak.
He does.
So the very first general they go up against was kind of general over basic supplies. So it wasn't like a very prestigious position.
His name was Claude, too.
Claude.
Which was weird, because it's
Claude.
Right,
the way the name
spelled
is.
the way you would spell someone's name.
But yeah, he's Claude the Claude.
Right, because he's from Claw, which is
or
K-L-H...
K-L-A-H.
Or no N, goddamn. Sorry.
K-L-A-H, and the people are K-L-A-H-D, Claude.
Right, they're Claudes from Claw, and his name is Claude.
Yeah.
And I was just it was weird to read it that way the whole time, and I'm sure Robert Asprin intended it to be like that, because he does too many puns for you to think otherwise.
So basically, Skeev and Oz, or Oz acting as kind of this, not mentor, but
second in command.
Yeah. There's a word I'm looking
number
for,
one.
but it's gone.
Is it number one?
No. Consultant. Oz acting as consultant, and Skeev basically
leading the troops and
trick Claude, General or Sergeant Claude or whatever he is, and then they interact and Skeev wins. So when the brute comes by, before the brute, the second person that Skeev and the gang are up against basically say that Claude has been court-martialed for gross underestimating incompetence thing. It's written better than I say it. So Skeev, when meeting the second person, was like, well, let me make a wager. Where it's like
let's make it more interesting.
Yeah, he couldn't have known what he was up against, so let's make it more interesting. If I beat you tomorrow, Claude gets off. He's no longer up for being court-martialed. Because Skeev didn't really want to ruin Claude's
reputation or his life.
He just is trying to defend the kingdom.
Right.
So the other guy agrees, and after he's beaten, inevitably, which is an adorable scene.
It is.
We see later that Claude is back. And it's like...
Yeah, so that was honored.
Yeah, that guy was actually honorable, and, he did not reappear, so he probably got court-martialed. But he was still willing to get Claude off. So when it's the brute and hostage, the brute decides... get rid of two birds with one stone and use Claude as Skeev's hostage, even though he knows he's going to kill Oz, so therefore he's expecting Skeev to kill Claude, and it's like, oh good, he got off of court-martial, but I didn't like him anyway, so he's gonna die. But Skeev doesn't.
No.
And Skeev's like, just don't rejoin the...
Yeah, he's like, just go.
Just go somewhere.
Go, but it better not be going that way, back towards troops. Don't do that.
Yeah. So he definitely has this really strong compassionate side. He has very strong compunctions.
Compunctions.
There's a word.
Convictions?
Yes, but not. But let's go with convictions. Has very strong convictions. There's another word that's similar.
It's not compunctions. I don't think that's the word.
No, it's It's close to
I
compunction.
have to fact check it. Is compunction a word? I doubt it.
We have nobody watching, so nobody can fact check while we talk.
Oh well.
Oh well.
I'm too busy knitting. I can't be bothered.
No. So that's a really interesting thing about Skeev. It's a lot of character development for Skeev being put in this really extremely tough situation, accidentally getting himself into a further situation by ending up being the boss of his army.
Yeah.
And then having to kind of figure out how to deal with all this. And he's up for the challenge, and it's, again, like a well-written book. The challenges are tough enough that you're like, I hope he can make it through, but you're not sure.
Yeah.
But when they do make it through, it's not like, oh yeah, they have main character invincibility, which, I mean, almost all characters do. But it's like, well, I can see how much effort he put into this. It makes sense how he overcame this.
Right.
And so it was really well done. I mean, that's definitely why this is one of my favorite books. Like, when I think fondly back of books I've read in the past, this is one of them, just because of that. I do wish there was more back and forth with the army. Because we had like 4 interactions with the big army, and each one Skeev kind of won. And it's like, I wish there was a little back and forth. I wish there was more, because I enjoyed all the interesting things.
But at the same time, it's like, the only thing that'll happen is the more and more escalation that Skeev, uses his wits and his trickery to get it done. Because...
yeah.
It's basically, and he levels up. He learns a new skill, being able to create illusions from
grass.
Yeah, it has to be any living thing. Yeah. He can create illusion around. So he started it by seeing if he could use the trees that they were camping out in to make them look like a whole bunch of Purvex. So a whole bunch of Oz's, which is intimidating because it's a tall reptilian humanoid creature with really big teeth.
Even though Skeev is technically taller than Oz. You wouldn't know it from this cover art or...
Well, and I keep wondering about that because it keeps... Okay, so this cover art is different from the cover art that I've been reading. I downloaded the digital version for the Nook, and it is...
And it has the art from the comic book.
Phil Foglio, which I can only assume is an Italian name. And I don't like it. And it's not so much that his style annoys me, which I don't care for the style in particular, just because it's really cartoony. Like, this is almost,
too real?
Well, this is more realistic.
It is.
Is what I'm saying. But Phil Foglio... his stuff is a little bit more cartoony, more exaggerated, as you say.
And it was from a comic in, I think I think it had its own book, and then a number of the strips were in Dungeon magazine. So definitely for nerds.
Well, yeah, but
in the back of Dungeon magazine always had 5 or 6 pages of comics from various different people.
Yeah. But what I don't like... I mean, I think in terms of proportion, yes. I think his illustrations are a little bit more accurate because in his illustrations, Oz is more of a squat-ish creature that's a little bit more, not tall and muscular like this guy likes to do, but more demon-y looking, less humanoid, more demon-y looking, more like a scaly frog almost with really big teeth, which is fine. I don't particularly care for it, but that's fine. But it's... One of the things I didn't like for the illustration in this particular book is that at the very beginning, when Skeev goes to do his audition for the king as court magician, a guard stops him as he's entering the castle grounds and, has this pike, essentially, that he's threatening him with. And Skeev takes the pike, using his mental abilities, he levitates it away and turns around so it's pointed directly at the guard. Now, in the book, when you read it, the guard is extremely unimpressed. The guard is just like, yes, I get it, you're a magician. Please go join the others for your audition. That kind of stuff. Very dry. but the illustration shows the guard being terrified.
Yeah.
And I don't like that because that's not what happened in the book. It changes the mood, especially because the illustration comes first before you read what the guard's actual reaction was. And it kind of, for me, it throws me off because I'm such a visual person that, you know, I'm trying to visualize the scene in my brain. Here's a helpful illustration of what the scene looks like. I'm like, okay, cool. But that's not actually what it looks like because the guard isn't terrified. He's not intimidated. He's annoyed.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's not what it says, Phil. Why can't you illustrate it the way it is, Phil?
Yeah.
But anyway, that's my complaint.
I don't know what the story is about getting Phil's artwork in the books, whether they just took from the comics or if he made art specific for the book. But
yeah, I'm not
because, I mean, anytime you adapt to another media, things are going to change.
True.
But, yeah, so I don't know the story behind that. There is one artwork on a later book where we start meeting some more pervs. And I do like that artwork of the Pervex. But I can't
remember who it is. I remember you showing me the illustrations, but I can't. I
Yeah.
almost feel like that is Phil. And that's fine if you're just doing an illustration to just kind of helpfully be like, this is what the character looks like.
I don't think it's Phil, because the
Maybe
face
not.
of the humans isn't
not as
stylized.
Yeah, it is pretty stylized. But anyway, we're reaching our hour mark. So, what was your favorite opening chapter quote?
Oh, geez, you know what? I forgot.
I am prepared.
Okay, I actually mine is the very first one.
What's the very first one?
Life is a series of rude awakenings. Rip Van Winkle.
Yes, that is a good one. I had two that kind of made me chuckle, or it's three in all, but two of them are related. So one of them was from Vlad. It just says Vlad. Of course, it's Vlad the Impaler. And I think the quote is, now that's a show or something. Which, if you know anything about Vlad the Impaler, a.k.a. Dracula, then you can kind of figure that out. Because it's the whole head on a pike thing. Just like... Anyway, Vlad was not a nice guy.
Yeah, I have a second one. But
it like, I read it and I literally facepalmed. I was like, oh my god, what? That's terrible. Okay, what's your second one?
No, you do your second one because you were prepared.
Okay, and then my other one is the combination of a quote from General Custer then a quote from Sitting Bull, which I can't remember the quotes exactly, but like General Custer is saying how it doesn't matter if the opposing army has more.
Hold on.
Because obviously the story is Sitting Bull, of course, demolished Custer.
Numerical superiority is of no consequence. In battle, victory will go to the best tactician.
Okay, that was Custer. But then Sitting Bull said, and it should be the next one.
No, it's Rhesus was in there, and Travis. Sitting Bull. One need not fear superior numbers if the opposing force has been properly scouted and appraised.
There you go. So I really liked those. Those were my faves.
Yeah. So my other favorite is, should old acquaintance be forgot? Count of Monte Cristo.
Oh yes, because you love Count of Monte
Cristo. Rude.
It is pretty rude. But it made me think of the song more than anything when I read it. So.
But yeah, it made me think of the Count not forgetting his old acquaintances. It's like,
He doesn't.
So what would you say is the theme of the book? I have one if you want to think about it for a second.
The theme of the book. Well, the idea for the king, for the king's, for the king's advisors, one being an army general, the other being more of a counselor and more, he wants magic to win kind of thing. Like the idea of, swords versus sorcery. Of course, in the end, neither wins. It's just more of an agreement. It's like, hey, what if we just stop? We give that a try. But I think, the overall theme of the book is the idea that things are never as they seem, and never assume that just because someone is extremely old, it doesn't mean that they can't still shoot the wings off a fly without killing the fly. Never assume that just because the army is huge and is coming for you that they want to do that. Maybe they would just as soon not do that. Yeah. And they just have to repay their gambling debts. So if you help them out with that.
Yeah. So if we actually did the theme of the first book, that was going to be the one I was going to go for the first one as well. I mean, that's kind of the running theme through the entire series.
Yeah, that nothing is as it seems.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah. And so my other theme, which is true for other books as well, is that confidence can, like, move mountains, basically.
Yes.
It's like, as long as... Whenever Skeeve is confident, or whenever anyone's confident, things kind of work well.
They
like,
do.
Not arrogant. Like, Oz got arrogant about being able to find mercenaries.
Right. He can be very arrogant.
But like, when Skeeve was confronting Ajax about Ajax trying to leave.
Yeah.
That took a lot of confidence. That
to go up in the
it's very hard
space.
to... Yeah. Like, when you read the book, it's, like, hard to see Skeeve having. But it comes out... occasionally, like, even from the first book, and it's getting more and more, and he's definitely becoming more confident.
Right, which is what you would expect from a middle to older teen.
Yeah.
You know, who's
starting to learn his craft better and better.
Yeah. I don't know what row I'm
on. But yeah, that's another theme that lasts through many of the books.
Yeah, and it gets more and more, and it is fun when a couple of, some books down the line, Skeeve has done a lot, and like and he is very confident, and it leads to a lot of really comical stuff, because it seems like everyone will be in awe, like, oh my god, it's Skeeve the magician and his his companion Oz and all this stuff, and everyone's in awe, and they're just bickering amongst themselves. Oz and Skeeve are just yelling at each other. Like,
I also love in later books when Skeeve does get put up against something that he has no idea how to deal with, he falls back into, like, just, having no idea what to do. And it's like, oh, Skeeve. Yeah. You've come so far.
It's like, just you know what to do. Calm down.
Yeah. I do like what you said, the magic versus... Or not magic. Magic versus military.
Yeah, sword versus sorcery is what I said.
Sword versus sorcery. And the answer is compromise.
Yeah.
In fact, kind of the answer that Skeeve provides is military. Because he turns to Grimble and says, you shouldn't stop funding the military because I've shown how valuable I am, and I need to be doing other stuff and improving my studies to stay valuable.
Right.
So I'm not going to keep defending your country.
Yeah, so you need a military force. And hey, look how lucky for you, there just happens to be one here. Isn't that great?
So, okay, I know we're going a little late. Usually good podcasts, kind of, and live streams are about an hour and a half. So we still have a little time to push into. Because we didn't talk about the King, Grimble, or Badax.
I know.
What did you think about them?
Well, the King doesn't get a lot.
Book.
Yeah,
in
this book, and all I really remember of the King is when maybe the next book or something, but when the Queen shows up.
But that's a bit later.
That's later. So we don't really get a lot from the King. We know that he's young. We know that
he's much younger than I always envisioned.
Right. He's very young. The way he's described is that he's his features make him almost effeminate. So I think the idea is that he's early 20s and very good looking.
You know what image just popped into my head? From Monty Python, the prince who's trapped in the tower.
Yeah. That's a good one. But no.
It almost works.
It almost works. But like the illustration again that Phil puts in the book shows him being very effeminate and almost like an anime boy-ish.
Huh. So,
in my opinion, attractive. I happen to like my men to be very angular and nice. But anyway, but he doesn't get a lot of lines in this book. It's obvious that he really depends on his two counselors to not necessarily run the country for him, but he relies heavily on their input.
Yeah.
So to that end, we have General Bad Axe and we have Counselor Grimble. So General Bad Axe.
Again, in this book, we don't get too much. We get more of him later.
We get more of him later, but your general reaction is kind of a typical general, gruff, military type kind of guy. Always has his axe on him.
Kind of bullheaded.
Yeah, very bullheaded. Always has his main weapon of choice, which is an axe, on him, and he kind of defaults to it if he gets angry or whatever. So he's gruff, and at first you're kind of like, he's the first one to say, if Skeeve is successful defending the kingdom without the aid of any military, he thinks all his funding for military will then be pulled.
Which Grimble was definitely trying to do.
Right, which Grimble is trying to do. And Skeeve is coming back victorious, and the idea is that he has men along the route who will ensure that Skeeve does in fact not return.
Yeah.
So he's basically like, I'm gonna kill you anyway. So at first you're kind of like, well, that's not very nice. And then Grimble comes up, and he's more, he's the penny pincher. He's in charge of the funding and the finances of the kingdom. So Oz is trying to, negotiate the salary and everything. And he very much wants Skeeve to win. But...
because he has kind of a bet with other chancellors of other kingdoms of proving that magic is enough, and then like his idea is he can save the kingdom so much money that all of a sudden he becomes kind of like the most wanted chancellor of all kingdoms.
Right. But if this doesn't work, then his name is Mud.
Yeah. And
he won't get hired anywhere else and anything like that. So does he threaten his life the same way Bad Axe does?
No, he threatens the reputation of magicians.
That's right. All magicians, but especially Skeeve, because he's the one who's doing it. So
there will be no more court magicians in any of the nearby realm.
Right, because
proving that they are just charlatans.
Right, exactly. So you don't really like either of them. Is kind of the feel of it. Yeah, and it's a
thin, if existing at all, line of how to get through this situation. So the situation is presented very early in the book, and you're going through this whole war campaign, and it's constantly in your mind. You're like, okay, well, we're going to assume Skeeve wins somehow because main character immunity.
Right.
But
then if he wins, then what's General Bad Axe's dude's going to do? Is he just going to kill him along the way? And of course, the ending of the book, where the idea is compromise, and the gremlin is whispering in Oz's ear, well, what if the army just went away?
Yeah.
And the idea of the army just going away is that while they'll take everything that they're carrying, including their armaments, they will leave everything else. And so from everyone's perspective, and what anyone hears, is the idea that the army literally vanished.
Yeah.
And left their equipment and stuff behind, and it's just sitting in the field. But what happens is that the army just disbands, essentially, and comes back with Skeeve and the others, which means all of the men along the road that were supposed to kill Skeeve can't really get to him because there's all these trained soldiers surrounding him. So, which is really kind of neat, because it's just like, that didn't happen because, get friends.
Yeah, so the ending compromise, and we already mentioned it, and you should have read it.
Spoilers! We need to put spoilers in the beginning.
Is that is that yes, magic can win the day, but it's going to be a lot more expensive than a military if you want it to be your only defense.
And very messy, because as we saw, the way that Skeeve was kind of able to send the opposing army into chaos, essentially, was getting them to turn on each other.
Yeah.
In a way that made them think they were being attacked by demons or all of a sudden a general became a demon or anything like that, which leads to a very messy war, because if your opposing army just kills itself, well, the land that they came from is not going to send people to clean up the dead. They're on your territory, so now you have to clean it up.
And then
so
also it's the threat of mutual destruction sort of thing going on as well. It's like, we could arm all the kingdoms with magicians, but then we're going to have demons aplenty running around our nice, homey backwater world.
I will say, I know we're trying to wrap it up, but one of my favorite scenes is when they went to like war council or whatever, or go face off against them and all that jazz, and they appear, and the opposing army appeared to have their own magician, and the magician raised the box, and this huge dragon comes out. And so Gleep, who is all of 10 feet long, comes, and it sounds like a lot, but when faced with a full-grown dragon who is centuries older, it's kind of like, oh. And that part is really funny. I actually did like the illustration that Phil had for because it's the larger dragon looking at this little dragon who's being very, very fierce, and the dragon's like, I don't really know what to do.
And I love the scene because
tiny.
after a big dragon tries to bat the Gleep away, they get head to head, even though the big dragon's head is the same size as Gleep himself.
And they get into a conversation.
Like a little dragon conversation.
Right, and they're just kind of talking, and then Gleep apparently convinces the bigger dragon that you don't want to fight us, you just want to go back and sit in your box. And the other dragon's like, sure, whatever, why not? And he just goes back into his box, and everyone's like, Gleep, you did it! I don't know what you did, but it's great!
It's like, how did you do that? And wait, I need to look up this line.
It's so cute!
But yeah, I figure it's something to the fact that because Gleep is attached, and the other dragon is not attached, Gleep can say, here's the wonders of what being attached is and what it means. And,
maybe.
I know you don't understand because you're not, and I think something along those lines convinced the other dragons, like, I will, honor this attachment, basically.
Or maybe he's saying, like, please don't kill my owner, he's so good to me, blah, 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 and the biggest dragon, like, well, I guess I won't. I don't really have an obligation to do anything, because, the opposing military's magician is just using this medallion to kind of control him. It doesn't really say if it's through pain or whatever, but it's just a way to control him, to make him attack wherever they want him to. But the bigger dragon is just like, well, I'm not going to because the little dragon told me not to. And everyone gets so upset, and it is really funny. I really like that scene. And Gleep is just very, he's so proud of himself. He knows he did a good thing. Did you find it? I'm trying to locate it. Which kind of leads into another book where we do actually get part of the book, I think it's a chapter, from Gleep's perspective. And we kind of get to hear his inner monologue, which is interesting. And we'll get to that when we get to that. But knowing that, it kind of harkens back to what happened in this book. And it kind of makes you think, oh, well, maybe this is how he's saying it. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, fella, I cried. This is after Gleep comes running back after the big dragon walks away. Hi, fella, I cried, ignoring his breath and throwing my arms around his neck in a hug. What happened out there anyways? Gleep, my pet said evasively, carefully studying a cloud. It's like, even though he only says Gleep, he still does this whole...
which is very, very cute. I very much like it. But that's probably my favorite scene, apart from when they're surrounded by Big Julius troops and the gremlin whispers into Oz's ear. That was pretty fun because now Oz is like, holy crap, a gremlin! It's like, see, he's there. He exists. Apparently.
Yeah.
Or he chooses to exist at this moment and to be known. So, but yes, so I enjoyed it a lot more than the first book.
Yes.
Because as I said about the first book, I didn't like the way it was written. I didn't really like the way the story was done. But this one, a lot more fun. I don't know what Robert Asprin did in those 11 years between publication dates, but maybe he was working on his writing abilities or something like that. But definitely enjoyed it.
And
Lots
definitely
of fun.
The world is built better.
World is built better.
A lot more comedy. Even though the first one was pretty comedic, this has a lot more of the comedy in it.
The timing, even though it's hard to talk about timing in a written format, there is still timing in the written format. Because, you know, it's... When you expose someone's facial feature to a situation or scene, or, you know, how you order the verbal reactions of everybody, there is timing in written comedy. And it is much better here. You're almost always have a smile on your face when reading this, which makes it kind of hard to read it while I'm at work. Which, shh, don't tell my boss. But a lot of fun. So next week we're going back to sci-fi. So not Hitchhiker's Guide, which I'm sure you guys are eager about, but we are going to read Isaac Asimov's I, Robot,
a series of short stories that has almost nothing to do with the Will Smith movie.
Which is unfortunate because that was the only paperback we could get that had Will Smith on the cover. But we like Will Smith. I mean, you know, he's a good actor and all.
Yeah. So, yeah, my parents have the actual book that I grew up with and couldn't find it.
Yeah.
Well, couldn't find it in Barnes & Noble.
Yeah, we couldn't.
So we ended up with the one with Will Smith on cover, which again...
It's transfer in New Hampshire. Can't really just drive and grab it and come back. So, yeah. But anyway, so we will be reading I, Robot. If you wish to read along with us, please do. Again, we will be discussing all of it, so there will be spoilers. We'll try to announce that at the beginning of the show next time.
You know, I should put it like on the title card, like warning spoilers or something.
Yeah, spoilers. Duh. But that's somebody else's. We can't take Cinema
CinemaSins.
We can't take their spoilers. Duh. But yes, spoilers. But yes, and I'm continuing work on my laziness.
I look like I haven't done anything at all.
So let us know how you're getting on with your projects and what you're interested in, and if you have any questions or what have you. And again, next week is I, Robot by Isaac Asimov, not the motion picture.
Yeah.
Don't watch it because we'll only talk about it in terms of how stupid it is. If we discuss it at all.
I mean, I barely even remember it. I don't even know if I've ever watched it. I think I just watched the CinemaSins of it.
I remember that they have Audi cars in it. And they're self-driving cars. So that's cool.
But yeah, I'm excited because part of my goal of this channel was to get into more of the heavier speculative fiction. The type of fiction kind of unlike this that really challenges your worldview, challenges like your ethics, morality, perspective and all that. That's kind of like the kind of harder hitting sci-fi fantasy that I really love. And I, Robot is kind of a step in that direction. It's also written a bit lighter because it's for people who haven't really thought hard about programming, basically.
Which would be me. I don't know how to program.
So it's kind of written for you. So it's not a hard read, but it's definitely adds a lot of interesting perspectives that some of the books like Dresden and Myth, they're not really tough. Like Dresden a little bit sometimes challenges.
A little bit. Dresden will challenge the idea of good versus evil because as we go further into this series, you know, things and situations happen with Dresden and the question becomes, well, should this be something that he should have done? Whereas,
like, Myth is also, like you said, the main theme of this series of nothing is as it seems. It's like, as you're reading, if you want to keep ahead of Skeeve, you really need to be thinking of, like, well, you know,
it's kind of like,
how is this going to work? And it's kind of a decent problem, but both of them are not the most challenging things in the world.
They're not. So I, Robot next time, a series of short stories by Isaac Asimov. Give it a read, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Boop.